Okay. So good evening, everyone, and namaskar to all. So today we are having this second Foundation Day lecture. Although uh, Odisha Economic Association is now 56 years old, but we started the Foundation Day lecture from last year, and in fact, Odisha Economic, let me give a brief introduction of Odisha Economic Association. Odisha Economic Association was formed in the year 1968 in the Ravenshaw College, and uh, we started with a very limited number of members, but now Odisha Economic Association has 811 life members, and we have successfully completed, or you can say, the glorious 56 years. And uh, along with organizing the annual conference of Odisha Economic Association, we organized different lectures, particularly after the COVID times, as things became online. We were able to do a lot of events. And so that is one. We do organize annual conference, then we organize this monthly seminars, then we have three memorial lectures, and we organize different capacity building programs. Then we have been publishing Odisha Economic Journal since 1968. So these are actually what actually we do briefly. And now with that uh, brief note about OEA, let me first of all welcome the speaker of this evening, Dr. Arun Kumar Naik. He is going to talk on an interesting or important topic, energy security for a $35 trillion decarbon India at 2047. I will give the detailed no introduction about the speaker after a while. Now, may I request the President of Odisha Economic Association, Dr. Rabinarayan Patra, uh, who worked actually for a long time at Ravenshaw College, and then he worked as a deputy director at Gopabandhu Academy of Administration. Currently, he is serving as the visiting professor at Courts Koraput, Council for Tribal Research at the Dutch Koraput. So, uh, uh, may I request the president to preside over this meeting and have his remarks. Over to you, sir. Ravi, sir.
Thank you, Amarendra. Good evening, Dr. Nayak. We are very happy that we have got an expert to talk on this very interesting and important topic this evening. As we all know, Government of India targets a $35 trillion economy by 2047, and it also wishes to increase the per capita income of every single individual to 18,000 plus dollars from the current $3,000, and for that it needs to grow at 9 to 10% for the next years till 2047. And we all know that energy is central to achieving India's development ambitions, particularly, and it means that we should bring electricity to those who do not have it, and we should develop infrastructure. India's demand for energy is definitely outpacing its supply. And second, India is largely depending on fossil fuel energy imports and all that. And thirdly, India also is dependent particularly on imports of oil and gas. But at the same time, India has been at the forefront of climate action to meet the climate goals through its nationally determined contributions in terms of reducing emissions intensity of the GDP by 45% by 2030 against 2005 levels. To facilitate the achievement of India's enhanced climate targets and to meet the future goals, the government is developing the Indian carbon market to spur mobilization of investments for transition to low carbon pathways by accelerating the transition to a low carbon economy. That is what is possibly the say important theme which we will deliberate today. And the speaker is none other than Dr. Arun Kumar Naik, who heads the Nuclear Controls and Planning Wing at the Department of Atomic Energy, Government of India. Now we know that the government is planning a number of securities. We are talking of food security, we are talking of nutrition security, we are talking of human security at large, and now we have started talking of energy security. And this energy security implies that we have to formulate a comprehensive energy strategy with four key dimensions: that we should diversify the energy supply, we should expand the exploration and production capabilities, we should explore alternative energy sources, and we should think of transitioning towards a gas-based economy, green hydrogen, and electronic vehicles. And we know all that renewable energy is an integral part of this requirement, that we should go for renewable energy. We should emphasize that. And I hope Dr. Naik's deliberations on this energy security for a $35 trillion decarbon India at 2047 will enlighten us and will give food for thought. Thank you. Thank you, Amarendra. Over to now you to introduce Dr. Naik.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for your introductory remark and setting the context for the discussion today. And now I have the pleasure of introducing the guest, who is, a noted scientist. Uh, Dr. Arun Kumar Naik is a nuclear scientist and a mechanical engineer and has over 34 years of experience in BARC, Bhabha Atomic Research Center, and DAE, uh, working on advanced nuclear reactor design, safety, security, safeguard, and policy planning for energy security. Dr. Nayak did his PhD in nuclear engineering from Tokyo Institute of Technology, Japan in 2000, and worked in Technical University of Delhi, uh, then the Netherlands, sorry, the Technical University of Delft. Sorry, I'm sorry for that. Delft, the Netherlands, and in Royal Institute of Technology, Sweden. He also worked in Institute of Nuclear Energy, University of Germany, that is Stuttgart University of Germany. He was also a consultant to IAEA for several years. He is internationally well known as the core catcher man, uh, the Aspect technology for reliability of passive systems. He is popularly known as SMR Man of India. He has received several awards and is a fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering. He has authored 8 books and published more than 500 research papers in academic journals and conference. He also served as associate editor of ASME Journal of Nuclear Engineering and Radiation Sciences, Multi-Phase Sciences and Technology, Computational Thermal Sciences, and Frontiers of Energy Research. And but most importantly, Dr. Nayak has published 2 books, actually, which I will emphasize here. One is on unfounded fear for nuclear energy, and the recent one also is about how to fulfill India's energy security. So I think Dr. Nayak will also speak about those books briefly, and I would recommend everyone actually to read those books because I know the work of Dr. Nayak, who has come to Niger earlier, and he has given lecture a couple of times. So, and I'm fully convinced about the argument that he's building up through his books. So, with that brief note, I request Dr. Arun Kumar Naik to deliver the second foundation lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Odisha Economic Association, Professor Patra, Professor Amarendra. So kind, both of you, to invite me for this very, very interesting talk, which I have been discussing, deliberating over the years. Let me tell you, for last 2, 3 years, I've been thinking about it, and it's a nice platform to debate it, as you rightly said. At the same time, let me also thank all of you who have joined through video conferencing. This is Sunday evening, and I'm really sorry keeping you hold for next 1 hour 30 minutes. But there was no other way. But I oblige. At the same time, request your kind attention for this talk. So what I'm going to speak here is energy security for a $35 trillion decarbon India 2047. I think Professor Patra has rightly brought it out that there are two aspects involved. One aspect is, you know, that we are ambitious country. 1947, India was born, and 2047 is 100 years after that. And we say at the end of the Amrit Kal, 2047, the vision for India is to be a developed nation. And not only developed, we will be one of the largest economy with $35 trillion. At the same time, there is a bell which has rang. The bell is the right side one you have seen. The rising sea level, submerging villages in Odisha, global warming districts could tell that sea level to go rise, and many poor districts can go below seawater, and so on and so forth. There is a big challenge. And that big challenge is because of the climate change, global warming, and to safeguard that, like other nations, we have also taken a commitment to decarbon our energy sector. So there is a competitive thing. Thing is that we have to increase our economy to $35 trillion. At the same time, there is a challenge that we have to decarbon India. So this competing thing, what options left for India? And this is hardly 20 years left down the line. How to accomplish is the challenge, and that's what I'm going to talk here. Next slide. Yes, as I said, end of Amrit Kal, we imagine India to be a developed nation. What do we know a developed nation? The World Bank says today India's per capita income is just above $2,500, in fact, close to $2,600, and it must surpass $21,664 by 2047 if we have to classify India as a high income nation. So if you look at today, our economy is $3.7 trillion. It has climbed by 10 times. And there is also closely related to the per capita income has to grow from 2,500 to $21,664, 8 times. And there is also burdening effect on us. Today, our population is 1.4 billion. By mid of the century, I can say 2047, another 30 crore people have to join us. So we'll be 1.7 billion population by mid of the century. So all planning, everything has to be done with regard to that. And for that, what the Reserve Bank of says that India has to grow at the rate of something like 7.6% per year for next 25 years. But if inflation is considered, it's much higher. It will be either of 10.6% per year. And to accomplish such a huge economic growth, the energy growth has to be also proportional to support this. And there is a climate change, which is directly impacting to the energy growth. Why? Because today's energy is primarily comes from carbon-based sources, that is fossil-based sources. So we have to decarbon India by replacing coal, oil, and gas, which is more than 90% of today's energy supply. That is point one. At the same time, we have to increase the energy to support the $35 trillion. So these are the competing things which we have to accomplish in the next 22 years. Next slide, please. So it's a beautiful slide. What I have done, I've just plotted the topmost slide, if you see, from 1960 to 2022, two aspects. One is how our GDP has climbed. At the same time, our energy, that is primary energy, also has climbed. The GDP, you see, 1962 was very small. It was hardly 40 billion dollars, and today, as I said, we are close to 3,700 billion dollars, 3.7 trillion dollars. So it has climbed several times in the last 60 years. And similarly, if you look at our total primary energy consumption, that also has climbed up similar order in the last 60 years to support the GDP growth rate. If you look at the bottommost one, that shows how our per capita income has changed. Per capita income 1962 was very small, and I said today it is just around 2,600 US dollar per capita per head. Now, what is the amount of energy we will be requiring by if we want to accomplish a 35 trillion dollar? That is what I put in the right side graph. It is basically it is a something like I will say that imagination, or you can say it is a basically computation, or it is something that comes out from modeling. But what I have done from 1962 till 2022, I have plotted the x-axis as the GDP, y-axis is the primary energy consumption in terms of billions of units per year. And today, you look at, we are just close to 10,000 billion units, that is terawatt hour per year. This is total energy that India consumes. And if I extrapolate the same graph, and at $35 trillion economy, we will be requiring something like 50 to 60,000 total primary energy consumption in terms of terawatt hour per year, which will be roughly 5 to 6 times of today's total energy consumption. This number, please remember, if we have to accomplish $35 trillion economy by mid of the century, we need something like 50 to 60,000 terawatt hour per year, or 50 to 60,000 billion units of electricity to support that. So today we are 10,000, we have to climb at least 5 to 6 times. Next slide, please. As I said, if you look at topmost, whether you are able to see or not, even today, we are the third largest consumer of energy in the world, apart from China and America. We are the third largest. But we have a problem. Our population is 1.4 billion. So if I take the per capita energy consumption in terms of kilowatt hour per person, the bottommost line is that of India. And today it's just 7,000 units per person in India per year. Even China consumes 4 times that of us today. And other developed countries like United States 11 times, and other nations 15 times, 22 times. So how much energy will we be requiring? So today, as I said, we consume 10,000 terawatt hour per year, and China consumes today itself 4 times more than us. And if we reach $35 trillion economy, my estimate is we have to grow at least 5 to 6 times of this energy. Next. So this is what I really something we have to worry. In the United States, what I say, more than 80% Americans have flown in a plane. But in India, large fraction of India are yet to catch a flight. Something like 90% Indians today are waiting to catch a flight. So in the developed India, what do you imagine? Everybody will be going in a flight. And if you look at how many Western world people own a car, almost if you go to Europe and America, everyone is having at least one car. And in India, large fraction of India are yet to do that. 90% Indian households are yet to get advanced domestic appliances like air conditioners, refrigerators, and so on. In addition, urbanization is expected to grow something like 51% by mid of this century. And what the experts say, if we want to accomplish all these things, we will requiring the power system of the size of European Union, what is there today, we need to have add in India every year to have to accomplish a $35 trillion economy. Next slide. Even with the present 10,000 terawatt hour per year, forget about 50,000, 60,000 to support the $35 trillion economy, the biggest worry is the greenhouse gas emissions. And this primarily because almost 90% of our total energy is consumed by fossil fuels, which emit all those gases, CO2, nitrogen oxide, methane, and all. And that is what is today's worry. Next. So this is a very, very interesting slide. A professor known as Japanese professor, Chikuro Manabe, he has predicted in the year, I think, 1960s, that how much the earth is going to warm if we add the CO2 concentration in the air. And in the year 2001, he got the Nobel Prize for that. What it says, the two takeaways, I request everyone can remember this number, they can share it with their family members. If the CO2 concentration in the earth doubles, the rise of the earth's temperature is going to by 2.36 degrees Celsius. Please remember, if the CO2 is doubled, the earth is going to rise, the temperature of the earth is going to rise by 2 degrees Celsius almost. And if you take out the CO2 from the air by half, is going to fall down by 2 degrees Celsius. So choice is ours, how much temperature we want to increase by adding more and more CO2. Next slide. Why should we bother about 2 degrees Celsius? Is there a fantasy or there is a science behind that? The 2 degrees Celsius limit was endorsed by a council of German scientists who were advising Angela Merkel, the then environmental minister of Germany. So what broadly they think, the human civilization are developed in a period when the sea level remained stable, agriculture or bio habitats could flourish. And that requires that 2 degrees Celsius has to be respected. But initially the critics grumbled that 2 degrees Celsius is very arbitrary. But later on, scientists could produce evidence that if you go above 2 degrees Celsius, there is a rapid rise in sea level, risk of crop failure, coral, or you can say there is a big threat to the habitats of the planet. And by 2009, nearly every government has endorsed a 2 degrees Celsius limit. What will happen? Suppose the Earth's temperature rise 1.4 degrees Celsius, 4.4 degrees Celsius, almost 3 times. What happens? The precipitation is going to rise by almost 3.5 times, 2.4% or 8.3%. Sea level can rise by 2 times. Worst thing is the Arctic ice, which can melt, and it's going to increase by 8 times. So remember, just by increasing the Earth's temperature by from 1.4 to 4.4 degrees Celsius, worst is the Arctic sea ice melt, which is going to happen by 8 times. And below the Arctic ice, there are billion tons of CO2 is already stored. If the ice melts, you don't have to burn fossil fuels to produce CO2. The CO2 will automatically come to the atmosphere. Next. So the climate change, its biggest impact. What the right side one is a very recent study. What it says, the last 22 years, India has lost alone $120 billion or $1.2 trillion because of the climate disaster. And the risk is mainly from physical phenomena like floods or the crops damage, and which also affect India's business. And what the experts say that if no action is taken again to mitigate the climate risk, India could lose something like 7.14 lakhs crores of rupees per year. And standard chartered bank says it could be of the order much higher, 22 lakh crore rupees per year we can lose per year. Next slide. So this is a very, very interesting slide. What is the choice? How much time is left for us? The topmost slide, if you see, in 1990, the globe was globally the CO2 emission equivalent or greenhouse gas emission was of the order of 40 billion tons of CO2 per year. How much? 40 billion tons in a year. And today, 2020, it has climbed from 40 to 60 billion tons of CO2 per year. And the climate experts have predicted that if we want to limit the global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, how much the Earth's CO2 budget? It's only 400 to 500 billion tons. And if I divide that by 60, assuming no more further increase in CO2 addition to the atmosphere, the time left is only 8 to 10 years. In fact, by end of this decade, the earth is going to the temperature of earth is going to rise by 1.5 degrees Celsius. And if on the limit to 2 degrees Celsius, the earth's budget of CO2 is not much. It's 1150 to 1350 billion tons. And if I divide that by 60, the time left is 20 years. So by 2047, we are burning a next generation that your habitat on this planet is threatened because the 2 degrees Celsius temperature could rise. And 2047, we are also asking the next generation to improve the economy so that it reaches $35 trillion. So this is from the first two slides. Now come to the next, right topmost. Who is emitting how much CO2 if they produce 1 unit of electricity? The United States, if they produce 1 unit of electricity, they release something like half a kg of CO2. China, close to 700 grams of CO2. India is one of the highest, let me tell you, close to 800 grams of CO2 we emit per 1 unit of electricity. United Kingdom, 350 grams of CO2. And France, one of the lowest, it's 90 grams of CO2 per 1 unit of electricity. It is all because in France, 68% of electricity is produced from nuclear. What the International Energy Analysis has put a target. If you want to limit your 2 degrees Celsius limit, if you want to produce 1 unit of electricity, the max to max CO2 you can release has to be less than 11 grams. The MIT, United States, says that no, 11 grams is still so high. It should not be more than 1 gram of CO2 per 1 unit of electricity, which is very, very difficult, challenging, no technology today supports. So what technology options we are having, that I have shown at the bottom, that the qualifying energy systems is only two. One is nuclear, another is hydro. No other technology, including solar, can give us something like 11 grams of CO2 per 1 unit of electricity. In fact, the solar PV gives 40 grams of CO2, more than 40 grams of CO2 per 1 unit of electricity. Next slide. And the other biggest challenge for India is the carbon tax implications. The carbon border taxes have already started, and that has become a threat, especially India's steel exports and other materials which are produced by burning coal. And that could impact our exports something like 15 to 40% in the forthcoming years. And the European Union, how much tax they're going to put is something like 60 to 165 dollars per ton of steel. And then steel we can never export to European Union. It will be too expensive to send there. And if you look at the right side, it's very interesting. I have downloaded just 2 days back. The carbon tax revenues which have been collected in other nations, India is going to do that also. France is one of the highest. It's close to $8 billion. Last year, the tax revenue has come because of the carbon taxes. Next is Canada and so on. So the Europe and America has already started charging the carbon tax if you burn fossil fuels. Next. India is also, the Gazette of India is trying to publish similar thing, that the carbon credit or carbon taxes. What United Kingdom is doing today, that they have started something like carbon pricing, which is today something like 40 to 100 pounds if we emit 1 tons of CO2, and that is today, and by mid of the century, what they say, it will be 100 to 300 pounds if we emit 1 tons of CO2. And if I translate that in terms of electricity, that means you are producing electricity from coal, oil, and gas. You have to pay 4 to 10 rupees extra per 1 unit of electricity today, and it will translate to 10 rupees to 30 rupees by mid of this century. So these are our burdens which are coming up. Next slide. So at COP26, we all know we committed many things. The most important one, that 2070 will achieve the net zero. I don't know whether we'll be really surviving 2070 if we keep on burning coal, oil, gas, but this is our today's target. Next. So what options are left? Many times we say solar, wind, hydro, bio, which are the renewable sources, can meet our energy demand. I said today, if you remember the number, we consume 10,000 terawatt hour per year. And if we want to be a $35 trillion economy by 2047, we say we require 50 to 60,000 terawatt hour per year. Now, what is renewable potential for India? Renewable means what God has given to our soil. Solar, there are many models, I'm not going to discuss, is hardly 2,000 terawatt hour per year. Wind is another 1,000. Hydro is another 1,000. Bio is very small. All together, if I add, it's only 40% of today's total energy consumption. God has given us the potential for renewables on this soil. Next slide. So what is the energy balance sheet for India? I said 40% of today's total energy consumption, if you completely utilize the renewables, we can get. What about remaining 60%? There's a big number. And what I say, suppose by mid of the century, we make improvements in the energy efficiency, smart grids, excellent storage systems, probably 4,000, let's assume 8,000. Still, to meet today's energy consumption, there is a balance of 2,000 terawatt hour per year. And if you want to have a $35 trillion economy, the balance is huge, 30,000 terawatt hour per year, which is 4 times of today's total energy consumption. And if I find out what is in terms of electricity, it's something like 5,000 gigawatt electricity. Next. Another worry for us, the coal plants have to retire. And especially this is today's government policy, those coal plants which have aged in terms of their life, they have to retire. There is no need of extension. So my estimate is that by 2047 or 2050, almost 200 gigawatt electricity coal will be off the grid, which is today's electricity supplier. Next slide. What America has done? America has started about coal to nuclear transition, and they have found that almost 400 coal plants can be the home to nuclear in the next, and producing something like 250 gigawatt. And the bottom graph you see is basically an American study. Suppose you built 100 megawatt and close to 1,000 megawatt, how much the employment can be generated if you replace a coal plant to nuclear plant? There is significant number of population which can be employed, which ranges from close to 30 to almost 60 or 100 additional people can be employed. So the American study says that almost by 2030, 30% of their coal plants are retiring, and that will give home to almost 400 sites for nuclear power plant. And these sites, they can reuse, because 35% of the existing infrastructure they can use, and that will also can produce something like 86%. This can be repowered, saving something like $275 million economy. So this is a beautiful thing: retire, reuse, and repower by transforming the coal to nuclear. Next slide. Another big problem for India, which this is not problem, this is my estimate, that if you look at captive power plants, which today drive the steel industry, cement industry, chemical industry, metallurgical industry, mineral industry, mining industry in India, in the last 10 years or 8 years, the power consumption has gone something like 40 gigawatt to 80 gigawatt, almost 2 times. And these are small size plants. And the experts say that if India has to be a developed nation, the steel industry will go by 8 times. Cement has to go by 3 times. And the corresponding power requirement, very modestly, I have considered. And if I say that it goes by 6 times itself, we require only for the captive power plants 500 gigawatt electricity by 2070. Next slide. Another thing is the steel industry alone. The steel production, if you see, it is growing very steadily. And my projection is that today it is producing something like 100 million tons per year, and it's envisaged to go to 600 to 800 million tons per year by 2070. And if the steel industry will be driven by green hydrogen in place of coal, the hydrogen requirement to produce 600 tons of steel per year will rise to something like 42 million tons of hydrogen per year. And if we need a nuclear power plant to suffice that, it will be huge power required, 300 gigawatt only for the captive power plants of steel industry. And majority of them are there in Odisha. I think that the Odisha government and policy makers have to think that Odisha today is one of the largest producer of the steel in the country, and who is going to rise significantly, almost 7-8 times in the near future. And if these captive power plants today, which are coal driven, have to be produced through hydrogen, green hydrogen, and that has to come only for nuclear power. And the power requirement is going to be huge, of the order of 300 gigawatt electric. Next, please. Look at transport sector. Today, almost, I say that 100 million tons of oil equivalent we burn in the transport sector itself. And if the transport will be replaced from oil to hydrogen, which will drive the transport, and also to meet the energy requirement by 2050, assuming will be a $35 trillion economy, the oil energy requirement will be huge. My projection is that only for a modest threefold rise in the energy requirement will cause 300 million tons of oil equivalent by mid of the century. And to produce that, we need 100 million tons of green hydrogen. And if that comes from nuclear, is huge, something like 3,000 to 4,000 gigawatt of electricity. Sorry, 600 gigawatt electricity from nuclear. And if that in place of nuclear, suppose we use renewables, the capacity is much more, 3,000 to 4,000 gigawatt electricity, which is beyond even the today's total renewable potential for India. Next slide. Another important thing for India, we all have to worry, is getting the clean drinking water. Today, 2022, the UN has already classified India as a water stressed country, and we are going to be a water scarce country very soon. That means the per capita water availability will be below 1,000 meter cube per hour. It's all because the rain god gives the same amount of water, whether it is 1947 or 2047. The per capita energy availability of water is exponentially decreasing because of the rising population. And the only option for the survivability of India is to desaline the seawater. And that also requires huge amount of energy, especially green energy. If 6,000 meter cube of day per day of clean water, the energy requirement will be 6,000 meter cube. 1 megawatt. Nuclear power, where are we and what we target till 2050? Today, we have very small amount of nuclear energy in the country. Is hardly anything. I said 22 reactors operating, only 7 gigawatt produced. By 2031, we envisage 22 gigawatt to make by mid of the century. There is a projection something like 50 to 100 gigawatt it may happen. But if we want to reach a $35 trillion economy by mid of the century, the clean energy requirement with the order of 40,000 terawatt hour, which I said, and if I convert into nuclear, it's on the order of 5,000 gigawatt electric. This is apart from full utilization of the renewables. So you utilize the full renewables, still you will require a huge amount of nuclear power if you want to reach a $35 trillion economy. Next, please. And what is the choice? One of the, I will say that the small modular reactors, SMRs, this may drive faster, cleaner energy transition for India apart from the conventional reactors. This is all because these reactors are factory assembled small size reactors. The investment is smaller, upfront capital is smaller, and this construction cost is also smaller because they are mainly built in the factory and directly installed in the site. So these reactors could be game changer, especially for the clean energy transition. They can be used in the captive power plants or IPP, and especially retiring coal plants can be replaced by these small modular reactors. And America and other European countries are taking a strong drive to deploy this type of reactors for the energy transition. Next. What I have done, I have found out what is the potential of these reactors for electricity production in our existing coal plant sites. Some survey I have done. Next. For example, you look at Talcher thermal power station, there is already some thermal power plants have retired, which was producing 460 megawatt, they have retired. If that same site is converted to SMR, this can produce something like 600 megawatt. Next slide. Guru Govind Ropur thermal power station, it is producing 1260 megawatt. The whole site, if can be converted to SMR park, it can produce 14,800 megawatt. Next slide. Even our Nalco captive power plant, we try to also replace the existing coal with nuclear. My assessment is that even though existing coal can be totally replaced by SMRs, and also there is room to add for additional power in the same site. Next. In south of India, there is a place called Uppur in Tamil Nadu, and initially there was a site given exclusively for the coal plant because transporting coal from eastern India to southern India is very expensive, so the site is still barren. So my assessment is that if the same site can be converted to a SMR park, almost 12,800 megawatt can be produced in the same site. Next slide. Faraka thermal power station, today it is producing 2,100 megawatt. It can be converted to a SMR park also with 2,000 megawatt. Next slide. Similarly, there are many other sites I have tried to assess and found that the existing coal plants can produce much more power if they're transformed to nuclear through SMR. Next slide. Yeah, go down. Even Rajasthan Kota thermal power station, it produces 1240 megawatt. The same site can be converted to a SMR site of 3200 megawatt. Next slide. Sanjay Gandhi thermal power station, today it produces 1340 megawatt, can be converted to SMR site of 2000 megawatt. Next slide. And in Manuguru, that is in Andhra Pradesh, there is a heavy water plant having the captive site. What we found, the same site can be easily converted from coal to SMR, producing much more power than it consumes. Next. So the advantage of transiting from coal to nuclear is the following. The land is always available. So there is no need of land acquisition. Water body is available. Site survey has been done. Transport facilities are available. So even trained manpower, especially for the balance of plant, is available. That's what the American says. If you coal to nuclear transition, 35% of the existing facility can be directly utilized. Next slide. So what is the cost? Levelized cost of electricity. Today, if you look at supercritical coal, it is 5 rupees 46 paisa per unit of electricity. And the same supercritical coal plant, if we use the carbon capture and storage, the cost just gets double, 11 rupees 16 paisa. Natural gas, 2 rupees 78 paisa. The moment I use CCS, the cost goes up by 3 times. Solar PV is one of the cheapest, 2 rupees 47 paisa. The moment the battery storage comes is 11 rupees 47 paisa. Wind 2 rupees 40 paisa. Moment we go for battery storage is 11 rupees 40 paisa. Nuclear today, our latest one is 5 rupees 20 paisa. So there is a huge room for nuclear to expand in India's energy transition. Next slide. Apart from these small modular reactors, recently America is starting very, very largely on the micro reactors. Micro reactors mean the size is very small, 10 to 20 megawatt, and exclusively targeted for green hydrogen production and rapid. This can be utilized, especially for India, for rapid deployment in northeast region. Today, probably most of you may not be knowing, in northeast region, though development is one third of that of average India. So a lot of energy is required to develop the northeast region. And we feel these micro modular reactors can be deployed large scale in northeast region, also in isolated regions, malls, hospitals, airports for uninterrupted power supply. Even they're so safe, they can be sited next to residential colony and close to national highways, and ideal for hydrogen production. And how much you will not believe, for 1 megawatt electricity it can produce almost 480 kg of hydrogen if you use a standard low temperature electrolysis, and much more like 630 kg if you go for a high temperature through SMRs and micro reactors. Next slide. So what is the socio-economic aspects if you do so much from nuclear? My estimate is that it's not only there is a huge boom in terms of millions of jobs which can be created, which are apart from local welfare development, the money required or investment that will come in this field is close to 3 to 4 trillion dollar. So it's a huge investment is waiting, and that investment is not only to decarbon the captive power plants, decarbon the transport sector, as well as replace coal to nuclear. Next slide. And what is the fuel? You'll not believe, for nuclear fuel, India has sufficiently large storage on its own. The first stage which we have, we all know that we have very limited natural uranium that produces very small amount, 10 gigawatt. But the moment we process natural uranium from the spent fuel, we get plutonium that has a huge, I would say, energy potential. It can go up the order of 400,000 terawatt hour. And if we burn thorium with that, it's much, much larger, 1400,000. And if we add all together, it is a huge number, 1800,000 terawatt hour potential only from nuclear using domestic fuel. For the next 100 years, almost half of this energy deficit can be met through domestic fuel, and rest can be done through imported fuel. Next slide. So the accelerating the nuclear power, the biggest issue is the public fear, radiation phobia. Nobody wants a nuclear power plant in his town or next to his door. So there is a book also I wrote on this, that why people are afraid of radiation. Some gist I'm going to speak here. As you know, if you get cancer, the person goes to hospital to get radiation to cure the cancer. But he has also a fear, if I get radiation, I will get cancer. So so there is a something contrasting thing in this. So there are plenty of evidences which I am going to say down the line to say that whether there is a radiation fear is a myth or it's a science. Next slide. What is radiation? Radiation is nothing, something coming elsewhere. We all are exposed to ionizing radiation naturally. And whether you are indoor, outdoor, sleeping, walking, eating, traveling, every time we are exposed to radiation. Next slide. How radiation is measured? It's called sievert. The unit of radiation is sievert, like distance unit, we say meters. Similarly, radiation dose is measured in terms of sievert. 1 sievert means 1 joule of radiation energy, which is going into 1 kilogram of human tissue. 1 sievert is a big number, so normally it is divided by 1,000 times, called 1 millisievert. Next slide. How much radiation you normally get? Suppose you go to heart CT scan, you get something like 15 millisievert. full body CT scan, 10 millisievert, abdominal X-ray, 4 millisievert, and so on. And if you live near a nuclear power plant, the dose is much below 1 millisievert as compared to you get the exposure from a heart CT scan, which is 15 millisievert. If you live near a nuclear power plant, in a year, you get less than 1 millisievert. Next slide. Where the fear came from about radiation? All of you know the fear has started from Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. In fact, before Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing, radiation was used to cure almost all diseases, which I am going to speak down the line. But after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing, we all know almost 200,000 people died immediately. And everybody thought these 200,000 people died because of radiation. But please remember that there was no radiation measuring devices that time. Nobody knew who has got how much radiation. In fact, researchers in US and Japan worked almost 60 years to create dosimeter. And after Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing, no radiation has ever been given to a person to understand if the radiation is given to him, what happens to its DNA. Whether he gets cancer, he gets death, there is no study has been done. Only available study until now is Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. Next slide. As I said, 200,000 people died immediately. But what is the energy of the atom bomb? Does it contain 100% radiation? No. 35% of atom bomb comes from heat and light, same as any other explosive. 50% is blast energy, same as any other explosive. Only 15% is nuclear radiation. And out of that 15%, 5% comes immediately, 10% comes very, very late. So it might have so happened that all those 200,000 people died. They died because of not radiation, but because of thermal radiation and blast energy. Next. So what America has done, the people who survived in Japan, their study was taken. And the radiation dose, vis-a-vis how many people got cancer and cancerous death, this was studied. And if you see both these broad tables, the left side is leukemia and the right side is from solid cancer. Broadly what he says, that if the dose is below 200 millisievert, 200 means I say 200 times more than if you live near a nuclear power plant, the risk was found to be negative. What does it mean? What do you mean by negative risk? In the sense, these Japanese people have lived longer as compared to average Japanese people, and they had a lesser risk of cancer death as compared to unexposed Japanese people. Next. In fact, the atom bomb survivors, of course, who got high doses, their lifespan was reduced. But those people who received low dose, especially as I said, less than 200 millisievert, the study shows that their lifespan has increased and they have reduced cancer mortality. Next. Now I'll tell you, during the Cold War period, United States, Russia, UK, they conducted thousands of atom bomb studies. And there were several thousands who were involved in making those nuclear weapons and experiments. Did they all die of cancer? So this is the statistics which I am presenting here. In the United Kingdom, 1950 to 60s, those who were involved in the atom bomb test, they showed no discernible impact on their mortality or probability of developing cancer or other fatalities. And even during the following 7-year follow-up, it was found that they had very, I'll say that almost the causes of leukemia, myeloma were much lower as compared to national average. Even Australians who took part in the British nuclear experiments did not show any evidence of them getting mortality because of this. Next slide. Operation Plum Bomb This was conducted by United States. They have a desert called the Nevada Desert, where they do all sorts of weapon tests. And several thousands were involved in these tests. And these guys were tested. And they were found that those who were involved in the nuclear weapon test, they had a lower mortality rate than the American population. And they were sufficiently healthy 53 years after the exposure. In the USSR, semi-Platonisky, where almost 20,000 soldiers were taken. That what has happened to them? They are all involved in this atom bomb or in the nuclear tests, and they were exposed to a huge dose, 20 millisievert to 4,000 millisievert, and the results show that no significant dose response connection for any cardiovascular illness, heart disease, or stroke. Next slide. Three accidents have happened until now in the history of nuclear power plant. The first one has happened in 3 Mile Island, United States, in which, because the nuclear reactor has several containments to confine the radioactive release, only 0.01% of the fission products released to the environment, which was a hardly 10 to 70 curie. There was no adverse health effects from the accident. Next slide. However, governor of Pennsylvania, he was scared. Almost 144,000 people he evacuated. And those who evacuated, they had the rate of cancer in and around that area was found to be insignificantly small. But the public fear still remains. Next slide. Chernobyl was the next. 1986 happened, and it's much severe than the TMI2. In fact, the amount of radioactive products released was much, much higher than the Hiroshima bomb. Next slide. And the administration got scared. 116,000 people they evacuated because of panic and social dislocation, and that caused more death, not the radiation itself, because people, especially old people, were asked to evacuate. They had already the pre-existing disease. Such people, because of panic and stress, they die. Next. And you will not believe the amount of a dose, in spite of such a, I will say that worst accident, was less than 100 millisievert, which is much less than I said the number. Those who received less than 200 millisievert in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, their lifespan was found to be longer, and they had less risk of cancer death. And in Chernobyl, the maximum dose which people received was hardly 100 millisievert. There is no evidence of them having disease like cancer. And recently, you'll find the bottommost one. The wolves who live in Chernobyl have to be found that they have become resistant to cancer. In a 2006 BBC documentary, it was revealed that those wildlife who are surviving, who are living there, were surviving, flora, fauna, signing. So the place has become a wonderful place for the habitat. Next. The Fukushima accident happened few years back, 2011. How many people died? Not a single person died. Only 3 on-site workers died because of earthquake and tsunami. No fatalities have happened because of radiation, because the dose which public received was very small, 7.7 millisievert, and up to 250 millisievert was the largest. But when the dose was just 1 millisievert, the Japanese government decided to evacuate 200,000 people, and that caused 600 non-radiological deaths because of the impact of transporting or shifting these people from their house to a shelter. So next slide. So mortality, on the other hand, what it was found, the mortality risk of residents in nursing homes, those who were evacuated, were 2.7 times more than the people who lived there before the accident. It's all because the dose was very, very small. So people who lived there, they didn't have any death. On the other hand, those who were shifted, they died almost 3 times more than those who stayed back. Next slide. I'll show you some beautiful studies. In Taipei, the capital of Taiwan, almost 1,700 flats were constructed with steel contaminated with a radioactive material called cobalt-60. And people lived, almost 10,000 people lived in this apartment for 20 years, and they got a huge dose of 400 millisievert. Then it was detected. So there was fear these guys might get cancer or death. But on the other hand, the residents were found to be healthy and they had cancer deaths lesser by 3% than the average Taiwanese people. Next. There is an interesting study. One gentleman called Ian Sheeter, he used to play in uranium mines in Canada along with his friends collecting the radioactive samples. So his friend said that, oh, you people are going to get problems later in life. On the other hand, what he found that they were all healthy and they had no chance of cancer. Even the mod pack, which was effective in removing arthritis and plantar wart pain. This is a very, very interesting thing. His cat had developed an allergy, and because of this radiation, self-radiation, it improved. Next. Leslie Corris, he used to use a uranium necklace from Nighthawk Minerals for 5 years. And he claims since then he never had cold upper respiratory tract infection. He says that everyone wears one of the uranium necklace will have a significant healthier society. Another gentleman called 1982 Luque was the first to conclude that low dose radiation benefit animal growth development, health and longevity. He also recommends that construction of meeting rooms next to nuclear power plants, but the dose should be 100 millisievert per day. 1 milligram means 100 millisievert per day. And use of monazite for radon rooms used for therapy and prevention. Next. This is beautiful slide. The National Geography started moving around the world to find out where in the world people live the longest. And they found there is a island called Ikaria, which is located 30 miles from the coast of Turkey. And here, the siblings live average life of 90 plus, which is much more than that of Europe and America. Why they live so longer? Because the islanders live and bathe in an environment high in radon and radium. Next slide. And Sokolov, there is another scientist who also reported pain relief in patients with arthritis using X-rays. And also he describes cell stimulation and successful treatment of some of the chronic inflammatory conditions using X-ray. During 1930s, wide variety of inflammatory and infection diseases used to be cured or treated by X-rays and radium gamma rays for a dose of 0.5 to 2 gray, which is a huge number. 2 gray is 2000 millisievert. Simple calculations show that no morbidity and annual saving of millions of life in the world if low dose radiation is given to them for prevention and treating of inflammatory diseases at a much smaller fraction of today's cost. Next slide. Asthma used to be treated in 1926 by ionizing radiation. The list of diseases which could be cured by low dose radiation include arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, neuralgia, spondylitis, bursitis. You name any disease, it is all here. Asthma, diabetes, hypertension, hepatitis, Parkinson's disease, and so on and so forth. High radiation doses used to be given to control bone pain from cancer 80 gray, and nerve pain also is to be controlled by giving radiation. Next. And there is every indication that even HIV/AIDS could be cured if low dose radiation is given. And there is a lot of, I'll say that evaluation studies have been done using mice if you give a dose of something like 1.5 milligram for certain days, the friend virus is to get cured. Next slide. Even cardiovascular related chronic diseases, they were found that no unexpected risk of cancer is to be reported, that the staff who works in the cardiac arthritis laboratory and they receive a median cumulative radiation of 46 milligram. So there is a saying that good way to reduce heart damage is to give a low conditioning dose of 150 milligram a day. Next slide. So diabetes, if you see, that low dose cumulative radiation less than 500 milligram doesn't appear to be involved with the kidney, cardiovascular system, and abnormal lipid profiles and diabetes. There was no statistically significant effects of cardiovascular disease in humans. Suppose cumulative dose of 500 milligram at dose of 10 milligram per day is given. Even there is plenty of evidences the diabetic mice which are given the dose at a particular rate, they were found to be sufficiently healthy, and in fact, these all helped to reduce the inflammation, insulin resistance, lipid profile, and also prevention of nephropathy. Next slide. And there are more than 100 research publications to support that low dose radiation, how it benefits the human system, tumor cells, diabetes, and stochastic effects. Next slide. Having said so much, so good about radiation, there is a big question why people are afraid of radiation. Because when people think about nuclear, they don't think about all those good things I spoke. They only think about nuclear warheads, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chernobyl, Fukushima, and cancer. So the public's fear of cancer with radiation, this is connected with the leading cause of fear. But let me tell you, the public paradigm that nuclear radiation is a carcinogen is a political, scientific misinterpretation and cherry picking than the actual science. In fact, governments used fear of radiation as an effective weapon during the Cold War, and that has resulted collateral damage to public morale about radiation. Next slide. Who is the culprit and what is the culprit? The root cause of fear is a theory called linear no threshold theory. In the sense, biological damage is proportional to radiation dose. Zero dose means you will never get cancer. As the dose increases, the probability of getting cancer is also linearly increases. And this is the most misinterpreted science or misrepresented science, which is presented as a fact, despite all those evidences which I spoke before it. Next. Who is the man behind that? The man behind this is a German scientist called Muller, who was against all this nuclear weapon test. What he did, just after the discovery of X-ray induced mutations, he started describing a linear no threshold theory by conducting experiments in fruit flies where he put a lot of dose to find the mutations in them. And then, if you could prove mutations in fruit flies, he said that also human beings, such mutations can happen. And that is why he built up a theory called linear no threshold theory. And later on, all communities in the world, including the chemical industry, in nuclear regulatory industry, they adopted that theory, except one country, which is France. That is why 75% of electricity in France comes from nuclear. Next slide. What is this theory? What does it ignore? As I said, there is only one evidence in the world, that is the Hiroshima Nagasaki bombing. The people's dose data vis-a-vis who got how much cancer or deaths due to cancer. So what he did, he plotted x-axis the radiation dose, y-axis excess relative risk of cancer of those survivors of the Japanese people. And what he did, he plotted them and joined by a straight line and removed all those data which was not falling in that straight line. What is those data? I have shown in green there at the bottom. You see the next slide. Next slide, those data are given. If you see up to 0.4 gray x-axis, the y-axis shows the extra relative risk of cancer. The risk is negative in the sense the y-axis, the data falls below zero. In the sense, until up to 0.4 gray, that is 400 millisievert, or even 200 millisievert, I'll say, which is 0.2 gray, the risk was negative in the sense, as I said, the Japanese people, those who are exposed to less than 200 millisievert, their lifespan is longer, and they had negative risk of cancer, which this guy omitted all this data and made the linear no threshold theory. Next. And then what happened? I think we'll go to the next slide. Yeah. So what is the biggest controversy in this theory? That Muller got Nobel Prize, and he also knew prior to his Nobel Prize data that what he said was wrong, because there was some evidence that until and unless the dose is above certain thing, this risk was negative. In fact, there are plenty of insects and who are exposed even to 1 to 40,000 rem of radiation, what is found that the lifespan increases 20 to 60%. And exposure at egg and larva stable also has found that at most low doses, that's 10 to 100 are the longevity of the lifespan of the exposure increases. And more studies in fruit flies have shown that X and gamma ray doses as low as 200 milligram to X significantly increase the adult fly longevity. Next slide. So the biggest controversy is here only. The Standard Oil Company was founded by John Rockefeller in 1870, who later established the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913. Muller had close ties with this foundation. In 1954, this foundation chose to finance a large group to evaluate ionizing radiation. The genetic panels of the National Academy of Science Biological Effects of Atomic Radiation, called Beer Committee, was established in 1954, and it was not chaired by a scientist but by a mathematician called Weber, and who was also director of the foundation. So there was no discussion. Muller was part of this committee. No discussion. This committee recommended Muller's theory of linear non-threshold theory. The dose limit to nuclear workers was 500 milligram per year before that. This was discarded the same day. Next day, the front page of the New York Times, it was published, which is owned by the same trustee, that radiation is dangerous. And then other media followed the suit. And that's how the fossil fuel came up, and nuclear energy was made as something like scary to the public. Next. So that is why I said, if you see the living nuclear power plants, we have made some dose criteria. It should not be more than 1 millisievert per year. And today, most of the nuclear power plants in India, the dose is even 1,000 times of that allowable limit. It's so small. And at what cost? We have to put layers after layers after layers so that radiation doesn't come to the public and electricity goes up. Next slide. This is my last slide. The biggest question is, are we radiation deficient today? We all have to discover and find a new room. I say that this is a beautiful slide. I always love it, that many thousand years ago, the human beings used to live in forest along with animals and birds. Once there was fire, and the animals, birds flew away because of the heat of the fire. But human beings felt the heat of fire and they utilized it, and that's how the civilization started. Nuclear has enormous heat. Time has come. If we want to sustain a $35 trillion economy, there is no other way except putting our steps into that. Thank you all for giving me the chance to speak.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for an excellent and educating lecture. I'm sure the audience must have got a clear picture that why nuclear energy is so important for us, and uh, why the fear for nuclear radiation is unfounded, and the background to it. Now, yeah, now we'll have the question answer session. Over to Ravi sir.
Sir, thank you. We can take a few questions, Samarendra.
Yes, sir. Yes. So now the
Now
floor
the
is
floor is
open.
open.
Yeah, Dr. Balakrishna.
Good evening, sir. Is it audible?
Yes, you are.
To hear
Yeah.
you.
So thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation and a detailed discussion related this and the radiation effect and many more things. I have only small query relating to the first part of your presentation regarding the sector specific energy consumption that you have less analyzed in your presentation. Aggregate you have shown that. Thinking about mining, manufacturing, service sectors, you're going to have a different sector specific energy consumption is going to be there. What are the strategies for that for 2047? Thank you,
It's
sir.
a very interesting thing. In fact, I told only about the steel industry. I said in the last 80 years, the steel industry captive power consumption has gone 2 times, from 40 to 80 gigawatt. sorry, the captive power plant consumption in Indian, I'd say that energy intensive industry has gone from 40 to 80 gigawatt. But as I said, 2047, if India has to be a developed nation, the industry has to go, especially steel industry has to grow by 8 times. And that is all related to mining and other sectors, which is related for producing steel. And similarly, cement has to go by 3 times, and other industries they are all related. So, in my opinion, the captive power consumption will go something like 6 to 10 times from all these industries, which includes the mining also. So it's a huge number. 880 gigawatt is today. I have projected 500 gigawatt only for the captive industry, which includes the mining also. Now, what is going to replace them? So the only option if I decarbon this is nuclear. I spoke the small modular reactors (SMRs) to replace the captive power plants, but mining industries will require much smaller power, where micro reactors could play another important role. In fact, the United States is developing a lot of size of these reactors depending on the different industries. So, in my opinion, SMR micro reactor will drive the captive and mining industries.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. The next question would be by Dr. Shivananda Senapati. You can unmute Dr. Shivananda.
Yes, good evening, sir. Am I
In
audible?
fact, it would be also good if you can introduce yourself so that Dr. Nayak would know actually your
Yeah. Good evening,
affiliation.
sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm professor at Chandragupta Institute of Management, Patna. Wonderful lecture. Thank you for educating us regarding the transition in nuclear energy. So my question is, do you believe that the current support, not in India, around the world, so that will help us in achieving that 2-degree kind of temperature in next 20 years, or how much is done and how much is left to done? So
a
that is
good
basically
question.
my
I
question.
don't know about your age. Every time I speak only two languages. One language is people who are the setting sun and people who are the rising sun. The rising sun, there is young people in the society. It's not only India and globally. They are now confronted with a big challenge. The challenge is saving a climate, a planet. Otherwise, if you don't save the planet, the habitats will become extinct. That is point number one. It's not only for India, it's global. And if I've seen the experts, the climate scientists, they have found a budget for the Earth. They say that if you want to limit 2 degrees Celsius, the amount of CO2 that Earth can store not to cross 2 degrees is only 1200 billion tons. And today we are emitting 60 billion tons per year. So 1200 by 60 is just 20 years left. And this is truth. It's hardly 20 years left. And that is why each country is committing for a net zero. Of course, we are committing too far away, but then we are ambitious, like China, India, and such few countries. They're too ambitious, of course. We want to be a developed nation. China's, I'll say that, of course, the GDP is much, much higher than India, of the order of 18, $20 trillion. We are hardly $3.7 trillion. So to reach the Chinese level, we say our energy level has to go 4 times. To reach $35 trillion, I think it will be much more than 4 times, 5, 6 times probably we have to grow. So this growth has to be accomplished only by non-fossil sources. Otherwise, I'm sure we all may be extinct by end of this century. This is what we all have to be alert. There is a planet we have to save, and to save the planet, we have to stop this. At the same time, to develop India, there is another source waiting, the nuclear fuel. And there is a phobia. I gave almost 15, 20 minutes talk, and there are books I have written also on this. This, I think, I request everyone to read, and the society has to accept. Otherwise, it will be too difficult to accomplish $35 trillion by 2047.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question, may I request Dr. Gopal Krishna Sarangi? You can unmute, introduce, and speak.
Thank you, Dr. Das. Very good evening, sir. It's a very comprehensive and insightful talk that I have been hearing for the last 1.5 hours. I'm Gopal Sarang from Terry School of Advanced Studies. I just want to, it's not a question, basically to understand your perspective on two quick things. One is there is whole discussion is on the one grid, OSOG. And you also rightly mentioned there is a limitation in terms of achieving the energy requirement, only focus on wind and solar. So what about that? Can we think of procuring renewables from other countries? What we do similarly in case of fossil fuel? That's one part of the question. Second and last part is basically there is a whole lot of discussion also. If you are moving into renewables, there is also a huge need for the critical minerals, which also pointed out by you very in your presentation. So what is your thought on that? Thank you.
I think these are very, very interesting and important questions. Both are very important. You have rightly realized renewable is limited for this nation. 1.4 billion population today, 2050, 1.7 billion, and a small land, huge population. Where is the land available to harness solar and wind? The big question. So what experts have done, whatever the waste land India is having, they consider a percentage of that and found that what is the maximum potential. And as I said, the maximum potential is only 30% of today's total energy consumption. And if you use or in tomorrow, suppose advanced energy systems comes, 40 may become 80% of today's energy consumption. What about the development? Where will get the energy? This is really a question which each government, whether it's central government, state government, everyone has to think. Otherwise, we have to live in a nation. We have to forget its development. But you said it's perfectly correct. Now the question is, as you said, can I import renewable from other country? I said in my talk, renewable is what nature has given us. God, whatever amount of solar insolation falls on my soil, I can harness the solar energy. Same thing wind, same thing is bio, and same thing is also hydro. Of course, hydrogen I can import. And today I am importing, or the country imports oil and gas, coal. In place of coal, oil and gas, the country, if it doesn't produce sufficient hydrogen on its own, it will import from abroad using these sources. So that way, today we put, if you see 90% of the oil is imported from abroad, 40-50% coal and gas are also imported. So this becomes a question, can we sustain so much of GDP growth if so much of hydrogen has to be imported? So there is no other choice except producing on our own. This is what I can say today.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Now may I request Dr. AJC Bose? You can unmute and introduce yourself and then question. Dr. AJC Bose, please unmute and ask your question. Okay, if you're not there, then may I request Dr. Jyoti Satpathy?
Namaskar, good evening, sir. I'm Colonel J. Satpathy, a veteran from Indian Army. And my question is based on your very lucid interdisciplinary approach via economics, energy circuit to radiation and all that. Quite refreshing to see a perceptible change in the topics of OEA. Good, that's a very good welcome sign. Well, Professor, my question is transcranial magnetic simulation, which is quite a sibling of radiation therapy. Can it be an offshoot of radiation therapy? This is one. And related to that, can this bring about a change in the genetic structure of humanoids? Can we have a Kalidasa effect? A criminal can be, through radiation therapy, be converted to a rational human being, a non-criminal person. So, on a lighter vein, I name it as a Kalidasa effect. Can we think of that? Because climate change per se, I don't think this is a feasible proposition, whether 2047 or it's going to be 2147. We cannot change climate. Yes, we can only change climate for the worse. The quantum of carbon footprints and the carbon handprints and the carbon emission and everything, this is a no-go. So as far as human race is concerned, human existence is concerned, can we implement radiation therapy for betterment of life? Thank you.
I think long ago, when I was a young boy, not boy, a very young man, 1996, first I went to Japan for my PhD. I attended a World Nuclear Congress in a city in Japan, where the title of the talk was very similar, what you said, by one of the president of the World Nuclear Society. And that time he had, still remember, he was showing a lot of evidences. If low dose radiation is given, how the life of vegetables improve, life of some other, I'll say that fruits is their shelf life is improved, and so on. Many things he was showing, and which was much more biological in nature, rather just I'll say that what I was talking here is just statistics, no biology I have spoken here. Then I had put the same question to him, that suppose low dose radiation is given to human beings, whether they will live longer, they will become resistant to so many diseases. And in fact, I still today remember the speaker said yes, but when and how, nobody knows. Because the radiation cure has been implanted in the mind of public just after, uh, I'll say that, Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. You see that before the pre-World War, this low dose radiation, even a higher dose radiation, was to be given not as a radiotherapy, but that time probably the research was not so robust, but to cure innumerable diseases which I listed. So time has come, of course, that world has to, the experts have to agree, the regulators have to agree. Again, the research has to be given or made on the effect of low dose radiation on human biology, and find
Okay.
out an effective dose to cure diseases. That will definitely should help. But when, how, who will do it, I really don't have the number
Was
or
this
answer.
the Rankin lab in Tokyo, sir?
I'm sorry.
Was it the Rankin lab in Tokyo, the lab that you're mentioning, conference lab, Rankin?
No, 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 no. Sorry. I was. It was in Suruga, not in Tokyo.
School.
A place where this thing was discussed called Suruga, not in Tokyo.
Thank
The
you, sir.
second
Thank you.
part which you said, yeah, if you say that I cannot accomplish a $35 trillion economy, or I cannot decarbon the energy sector, then both are correlated. If I don't decarbon the energy sector, the life is at
Risk.
threat. And there is also scientists say maybe by end of this century, whether the habitats will be extinct if we go at this rate. So decarbon is a must, but how much energy you can produce and what economy you can accomplish, that depends on how wisely you are using the energy sources to have a sustained manner. So this is an effort which I spoke, that $35 trillion economy is a dream of government of India. Some path I showed, but it is much challenge are there in between.
Okay, Dr.
Sir,
Bose.
yeah, sir, I have a political economy question. From your lecture, it comes out that France is an exceptional case. How they could snap down the political influence of the fossil fuel industry? Do you think in India also governments can do that? And secondly, in a war situation, if a ballistic missile hits a place of nuclear warheads, what would be its impact in terms of your lecture?
Okay, let me address the first part. Why France went so, I'll say that, so emphatically or so rigorously on nuclear. The oil crisis happened in 1970s. The French government realized leaving nuclear, they don't have any other way. You will not believe, almost France built 50 to 60 nuclear power plants in just a span of 10 years, because that was the need. So why France went is because of the oil crisis. Today, a similar crisis has happened. We are at a condition where there is a climate threat because of the fossil fuel use, plus we have to take the economy ahead. So it has to be a conscious decision of the government, policymakers, that what options are left. I showed some of the options, of course, here. Now, the next part you said, if a missile attacks a nuclear power plant, what will happen? This current generation, what you say, Gen 3, 3 plus reactors, which are being deployed, they are resistant. I can say the structure is itself designed to take care of not only such attacks, even the aeroplane crash also. So they are designed for that load.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Now the next question is by Dr. Uday Kumar. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, sir. Good evening. Myself, Uday Kumar. I worked for power generation in coal, gas, as well as in slightly in solar for 40 years and for Tata Consultancy also. I really very thankful, sir, Doctor, sir, and you have given excellent, and it is really different perspective. So far, what we believed is different, and what you given science based. That's why really it's very nice. But how to take it to the people, to the next, to the all the citizens in our India, because everyone has got that fear. So we have to take it that. And another one you told me, sir, that the SMR and the micro reactor that can be taken up in residential area itself. And sure, the radiation part is cleared. Well, what about the safety on if at all any incident takes place on explosion and other things? Those things we have to focus on that. And have you taken up? Because your view is totally different, and how the government of India and those scientists, your colleagues, accepting this, and how they will support us to make an association to spread this to end of the people and install more and more nuclear power plants in India. Because we are for nuclear plant. We are very clear on nuclear power plant. If safety is ensured, nuclear power plant only can meet the future requirement. We know that. We know that means we are agreeing with you. So this is my question, sir. Thank you joining with all of you, sir. Every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm really delighted that to the word that the people of Odisha, they will be for nuclear. Now, though you have two things you spoke, one is SMR, one is micro reactors. Let me tell you the perspective. SMR will not be definitely uh, in the house, sorry, next to a residential colony. SMRs are truly targeted, especially in these captive power plants, which I said, as well as, for example, in retiring coal plants. These will be the sites for the SMR, and they are huge today. Micro reactors, what America is today targeting, is what we have to also adopt in India. They are targeting even close to the residential colony and on national highways. They are targeting also on the hospitals, even the basement of malls and so on. Why? Their size is very small and they are extremely safe that they can be cooled by air itself. There is no need of having a what is that called water body or any other body to cool it. Third thing is they can be put underground, so people can live on the ground itself, and these can be put underground of the basement, sorry, in the basement of a mall, hospital, railway station, airport. So this is the, I'll say that new vision for tomorrow's nuclear industry. And as you rightly said, the mindset is different yesterday, and the same mind is going on today. But there is a need has come. Technology is being developed. I'm sure in next 5, 10 years, the world will be different, differently moving in nuclear. So time has come. We all have to realize it. And if we realize, especially community at your level, who are so much educated, and you have to take it to the policymakers, explain them that we need a $25 trillion economy by 2047. This is the energy requirement. This only we can get from renewables. The rest all have to come from nuclear. There is no other way. And these fears are unfounded. So we have to take it in that perspective. Together I have to work. It is not me alone who can build India. All of you have to be part of this journey.
My request you to kindly let us start on association or not association or group. I am not talking about that. One team to represent to India as well as to the end of the people. One point. Another point, you told underground. That is there I am slightly because in Fukushima also, since it was in underground, the DG sets have not worked, flooded, and it couldn't go for that reactor coolant or electrode cooling systems. No, just because you are the scientist. I am ISRO. I worked, but afterwards power generation. So, is it correct that the underground shall we go or how it is, sir? Don't take it other way, sir. Just
No, no,
my
no.
doubt.
I will never take
Because
other.
India is flooding always. India is flooding. There is no proper system to absorb the water. That's the
See, I'll tell you in Fukushima what happened. The reactor was close to the coast. And then there was a huge tsunami. Height was very high. That's why it entered into the basement. Of course, the disease and others were flooded. As you rightly said, correct. The ones which I am talking about, they are not going to be close to the coast. I said, suppose you have mine, you put in the mines itself, right? And then this one is covered by something. It is safe on its own. It's not requiring a DG set for its survival. As I said, it can be cooled by air itself. Doesn't need any external source of power supply. So these thinkings are inbuilt in such designs that on its own it is safe. Doesn't need any external service. So there is a technologically different driven system this one. So of course this needs more synthesis when across the table we talk. But today the broad thing which I am saying, the micro reactors which are being talked about, they're as safe as any other industrial energy system. There
okay,
is
sir.
no question of any radiation release for the public life to happen.
Thank you, sir. In my view, because of the emergency DG said due to because
Sir,
they
I
need to
think
more
there are
cooling.
some other
Thank you.
questions.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Now, Dr. Ganapati Mandali from Rajendra University, Balangir. Yes. Dr. Ganapati, would you like to ask question? Please unmute. No. Okay, if he is not able to unmute, in fact, I have a couple of questions, sir. May I ask those? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It,
since you emphasized upon SMR, and I have been also seriously thinking about the captive power plants, particularly in the context of Odisha as well as in other states. Uh, the questions are, what are the additional investment requirement for an SMR? So for example, no, if they set up a captive power plant, say the thermal, and if they set up a nuclear this SMR, what is the cost difference that we get? And then second is, can we use some part of the machinery that was already invested in a thermal power plant, or you have to completely replace all those things, equipments? And then direct and indirect employment and employment opportunities for this SMR and then thermal power plants. And then most important is the technology available in India? So I think I asked a lot of questions related to SMR.
thank you, Amarendra. I think I will start from the last one, whether technology is available,
Yes.
SMR technology available in India. There are two technologies. One SMR I said, which is a factory assembled, built like a refrigerator, you just come take to your house and plug. So that technology is yet to come. But we have traditionally small reactors in India, which you say is as good as an SMR with regard to safety, but of course not modular. That is the only difference. So these reactors, what today Atomic Energy Department is trying to deploy in the captive power plants without delay. And some of these private companies who own such captive plants, they have already approached government that we need new small reactors to be deployed. This is point number one. Point number two, you said what is the cost? The cost is in fact one fourth to one tenth of the international cost of the SMR. Our reactor is one fourth to one tenth of the international cost. So it's really cheap, our reactors. So it is there is a question that in fact moment we start deploying in our captive plants in India, there will be so much demand from across the border that please supply us also. There's so much industry is waiting. Third thing we said, how much the existing structure can be utilized. In fact, the American study I showed, 30 to 35% of the existing infrastructure can be used in this nuclear power plant if we put in the existing captive power plant. Fourth thing you said, how much employment can be generated. So I'll tell you, I also showed in my slide that if you put a almost 200 megawatt size reactor, it will require 200, something like 300 to 400 operators for this. And so, depending on the size of the plant, large scale employment can be generated. In fact, in my opinion, if we're targeting $35 trillion economy, using nuclear as a major source, probably every family in India probably may get a job, directly or indirectly. This is what is the objective.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Dr. Ganapati, are you now there to ask your question? If you have to unmute if you want to ask the question. Okay, if you are not there, then may I request the president of Odisha Economic Association, uh, Professor Rabinaran Patra, to give his remarks before you close.
Thank you, Dr. Nayak, for delivering a brilliant lecture. And what is the say most important point in your lecture is that we have an ambition of a $35 trillion economy, and at the same time we are in need of a high energy growth to meet our demand. And the challenge is that we have to meet this by decarbonizing. So that is important. So you have not only shown the say problems, you have also given workable solutions. So that is what is the say important part in your lecture. That it is not simply a lecture; it is just a kind of say workable plan to uh, transition from the present energy system to the nuclear based energy system. So I want to thank you very much. Actually, what is happening is that now carbon dioxide is becoming a problem, and your say presentation of a inverse relationship between carbon dioxide, sorry, and a direct relationship between carbon dioxide and surface temperature is very thought provoking. Actually, previously we were talking of global warming, but now we see it is not simply global warming, it is global boiling. So we feel the temperature everywhere. The climate is changing very fast everywhere throughout the globe. So thank you very much for having focused on the socio-economic advantages also of going for this nuclear-based energy and emphasizing on this energy security. Thank you very much. We have got enough value for our time. We thank you very much for sparing some of your important and valuable time for us and for educating and instructing us. Thank you, Doctor. I
Thank you.
now request Dr. Amarendra Das to please propose a formal vote of thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. So, no, at the end, that's what I would say. In fact, this meeting would have happened yesterday because yesterday was a foundation day. But then Dr. Nayak had an important meeting yesterday, so we had to postpone this meeting. But I could see the excitement of people. I think more than 70 people had joined this meeting, and so now the message is very clear that no, we have to go the way of nuclear, and because that is comparatively say less expensive, and particularly the social cost is very very minimal. So of course I have heard very frequently to Dr. Nayak, and I have become now fully convinced actually that nuclear is the solution for fulfilling our energy requirement. And I'm sure actually many of the people who are doing research on energy economics, and so they will now take into consideration these views, and try to actually do comparative analysis actually how nuclear energy can be actually popularized, and so that actually we fulfill the energy needs of India while reducing the carbon burden. And I would also recommend everyone to read the latest two books of Dr. A.K. Naik, which will really clear all the confusions related to the nuclear energy. So thank you so much, sir. And so in last couple of months or years actually, I've seen that Dr. Nayak has been very passionate about actually, say basically promoting, and it's not that he's simply actually campaigning for it. He's providing the scientific evidences actually why we should go actually for nuclear energy. So I can see the passion actually of Dr. Nayak, and I'm sure actually he'll succeed in having couple of nuclear power plants, particularly SMR in Odisha. Okay, so with that, actually, is no again, I'd like to thank Dr. Nayak so much for giving your valuable time to OEA and all the participants. And thank you all the participants who joined this evening, Sunday evening, to listen to Dr. A.K. Nayak. And thank you so much, the President of Odisha Economic Association, Professor Abhinand Patra, and everyone. So thank you so much. With that, we can end.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. The
Namaste.
meeting is
Thank you,
over.
sir. Thank you, sir, and everybody. Thank you.
Let me stop the recording.